Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me for this segment is Bill Magnuson, co-founder and CEO of Nasdaq-listed Braze, to discuss how customer engagement practices have evolved. Braze is a customer engagement platform that powers interactions between consumers and the brands they love. Recently released its second annual customer engagement review. Bill, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Great to be here as well. Thanks for having me, Joe.
You got it. And how have the events of the past 2 years fundamentally altered the way customers approach brand relationships?
Well, obviously, with everything that's gone on with the pandemic and related kind of consumer change and just the way that we live our lives, it's been a period of tremendous change. I think that when we look at the acceleration of digitization, there's a lot of trends to pick out there, and there's a lot of kind of hand-wringing and questions around, how much of this is permanent, how much of it was a pull forward, how much of it is temporary. What we're seeing, from the perspective where we're in, where we've kind of been on the edge of this change and transformation for over a decade now, since our founding in 2011, that COVID definitely accelerated a lot of change in these places, especially in areas like health and wellness and fitness and a lot of digital experiences, on-demand delivery. But broadly, what we're seeing is that consumer expectations have risen dramatically. The level of competition in all of these marketplaces has gone way up. And as all these digital brands have really focused on communicating with and understanding customers better through digital avenues, that we're seeing a lot of maturation, a tremendous change that's matching up against those rising consumer expectations.
What do brands need to do to rise to the occasion?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, it goes back to just understanding that your customers are humans and what their expectations are and, what they're looking for in terms of relevance. I think more tactically, we are really trying to push forward two key things. One of them is breaking down all of the different communication channels that exist. So, customers want to experience your brand in a holistic fashion, one that's seamless from, place to place, whether they're interacting with you on the web, on mobile, in the real world, through email or SMS, or through, your in-person agents, or through products and other sorts of digital services that are being delivered. From the customer's perspective, that's not 10 separate teams and different cost centers and, all these different groups. That's just one brand experience. And so, first and foremost, you need to make sure that you're delivering holistically across all of those. And then the second big one is it's also about breaking down silos, but instead of it being kind of amongst interfaces, it's about bringing to bear different skill sets and disciplines to the practice of customer engagement. And so instead of this just being kind of the sole responsibility of, say, a marketing group, you bring in product and engineering groups as well, so that you can integrate a lot of these messaging and marketing experiences right alongside the product experience. Then you bring in data science teams, making sure that they've got raw access to understand, how are experiments going, what drives relevance, how do you personalize these things in a deeper way. And so I think those two trends, both of which are about breaking down silos and kind of connecting things, one, the experience for the customer, and then two, the skill sets that are inside your organization that really drive to service that customer.
Are there any trends that you can discern from an industry or geographical perspective?
Yeah, I mean, definitely from an industry perspective, we've seen a lot of change. I mentioned a couple of those up front, but tremendous amounts of innovation in both health and wellness and personal fitness. Those were driven obviously by consumer demand. We also saw a lot of regulatory barriers get broken down, specifically in the health and wellness space, as definitely the pandemic kind of forced a lot of change. There was a lot of red tape that was holding up innovation in that space before that got all broken down in 2020, and that has really allowed for a lot of those new businesses with financing from venture arms and such to really push ahead. So we've been excited to see that. I think from a geography perspective as well, we've obviously seen a lot of businesses that started domestic go global on using the app stores. Mobile has been such a kind of global phenomenon. The app stores have provided the ability for digital applications and services to expand to every corner of the globe, no matter where you start. And so I think two biggest trends are, we're certainly seeing accelerated change in those verticals. But more broadly, you see that type of transformation I was talking about happening across the board. But then also just a lot more businesses are becoming global now than ever were before. Even things where you look at businesses that would interact with health insurance or telehealth, to connect these two examples together. That's not something that I think we would have anticipated would have gone beyond domestic boundaries because of regulation in the past. But we now see more of those services expanding internationally.
What challenges does an increase in digital touchprints represent?
Well, I mean, it's a challenge, I think, that is just born out of expectation and delivering high quality services, right? When you're trying to meet customer expectation and you're competing with a more varied landscape now. Of course, the flip side of these domestic businesses going global more often is it means that you're not insulated from competition as a domestic business anymore. You need to be able to compete at a global level, and you've got rising customer expectation all along the way. So then in order to meet that, as I spoke about before, those two big trends of how do we break down silos within organizations, ensure that there's interdisciplinary collaboration, that these groups are armed with, advanced software, and they have ambitious roadmaps. Because the other thing that we've seen in the customer engagement review over the last couple of years is that this is an ever increasing challenge. Businesses, your competitors are getting better every year, and consumer expectation is also rising right along with that every year. And so if you're not, advancing and moving forward on a consistent basis, you are definitely falling behind. And a lot of that comes out of just prioritizing organizational agility, interdisciplinary collaboration, and making sure you've got the right technology to, really have those people shine.
And Bill, to wrap up here, tell us about Braze's Customer Engagement Index and the intersection in technology behind those teams.
Yeah, so the Customer Engagement Index looks to try and define the different dimensions that we've seen correlate with success in both customer engagement, execution, as well as the business outcomes that drives. And so if you look into the Customer Engagement Report, what you're going to find is that we've broken this down based off of access to data, the utilization of technology, the way that organizations goal themselves, and the way that they analyze results and experiment over time, the structure and the skill sets that are within the teams, and then also the first-party data assets and first-party relationships that they're investing in building. This is definitely an activity that requires a lot of different kind of dimensions of attention. Obviously, we've spoken a lot about the skill sets that it takes to be ambitious and sophisticated in this space. But there's definitely a rising playbook for it as well. And there's more and more people in the industry every year that are getting trained up in these new ways of tackling the customer engagement problem. And so our customer engagement review and that index are really about helping people understand where they are and follow a game plan in order to get to rising levels of sophistication over time.
All right, Bill, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.